Late October, wind cut across the Montana ridge as Jacob Morgan sat on his horse, watching the scene below. A woman in a faded calico dress, mud-stained up to her knees, dragged a long pine log up a rocky slope. A rope was looped over her shoulder, and every step looked painful, yet she did not stop. Her boots dug into the ground, her jaw tight with effort. The log was heavy enough that two grown men would have cursed while lifting it, but she did not complain. She did not rest. She fought for every inch. Jacob nudged his horse down the hill. As he came closer, he saw a half-built cabin with walls only chest-high, no roof. Timber scattered everywhere. A small canvas tent sagged beside a weak fire. It was clear she had been working alone for a long time. The woman heard his approach. She stopped pulling the log and straightened slowly, breathing hard but steady. She did not look scared or helpless. She did not step back. She just stood there with her chin raised, watching him ride up. "Afternoon," Jacob said as he stopped and dismounted. She kept both hands on the rope like she was not sure if she needed it for defense. "That's a lot of cabin for one person." "Don't need charity from strangers," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes followed every move he made. Jacob took a slow look around. Roof won't hold without proper bracing. Storm is coming in 2 weeks, maybe less. I'll manage. He looked at her again. Really looked. That was when he noticed the scar. It ran from her left temple down to her jaw. It was pale against her skin, old but clear. Burns, he guessed. She noticed where his eyes landed. Her shoulders tightened. She spoke in a low voice, like she had said it too many times before. "I'm not pretty." Jacob met her eyes with a steady look. "That's fine. I need honest, not fancy. Winter kills pretty folk first out here." Something shifted in her face. Not a smile, not relief, but something soft and unsure. She was not used to gentle words. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Jacob shrugged. "Because I'm tired of liars and nice dresses. A man can only eat so many pies that come with fake smiles. You working this hard means you're real." He walked over and picked up her hammer. He tested its weight. The handle was wrapped with cloth to make it easier to grip. It told him she had small hands, used to fixing things without complaint. "You got nails?" he asked. She pointed toward a crate. "I can pay with labor. I cook. I mend." "Fair enough," he said. Jacob checked the walls of the cabin. The cuts were clean. The placement was smart. She planned well. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara Brennan." "Jacob Morgan. I run cattle 3 miles south." He glanced at the darkening clouds above. "We start tomorrow at first light." Clara did not stop him from leaving. She watched him walk back to his horse and ride into the trees. Only when he was gone did she sit on a stump and press shaking hands together. She had not had help in 6 months. Hope felt as frightening as the storm on the way. The next afternoon, Jacob returned. He crouched beside Clara's small fire as she boiled coffee in a dented tin pot. He studied her tools, her organized nails, her neatly stacked lumber. Everything was done with care. "You do good work," he said. "Taught myself," she replied, handing him a cup of coffee. It was strong and bitter but warm. "After my husband died." Jacob sipped. "Town has a lot of widows. Why buy land out here alone?" Clara stared into the fire for a moment. "Merchant in town wanted me after Thomas passed. Said I needed a man's protection. When I refused, rumors started. They called me cursed. Said I burned my own house down." Jacob waited quietly. She took a breath. "Fire started during a fight. Lamp broke. I tried to pull him out. He hit me into the flames. I got free. He didn't. Town buried him a hero and buried me with lies." Her fingers touched the scar lightly. "So I bought this land. If I'm going to be alone, I want it on my own terms." Jacob listened. He had heard many stories in his years on the frontier, but this one sat heavy in the cold air. "What about you?" she asked. "Ranch that size should have a wife, sons." Jacob set down his cup. "Had a wife, Sarah. Beautiful woman. Everyone loved her. She wanted town life. Parties. Attention. I wanted ranch life. Simple, quiet, honest. He paused. She died 2 years ago in childbirth. Baby, too. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. Don't be. I loved her, but near the end we were strangers in the same house. Town widows circle me now like buzzards. All performance, no truth. Clara stood too, facing him. So this arrangement is practical. You need help before winter. I need meals and mending. Nobody needs to make it more than that. Agreed, she said. They shook hands. Her grip surprised him. Firm, strong, honest. We start on the roof frame tomorrow, Jacob said before riding off again. Clara watched him disappear into the trees. She turned back to her cabin. Hope was risky, but survival was impossible without it. Maybe this time, it was a risk worth taking. Days passed, and Jacob returned every morning. They worked side by side in the cold air. The cabin walls rose higher. The roof frame began to take shape. A quiet rhythm grew between them. They worked without wasted words, and still, something unspoken connected them. One afternoon, as snowflakes began to fall, they worked on lifting a beam into place. Hold this steady, Jacob said. Clara braced it while he hammered. Breath fogged between them. Snow settled lightly on their shoulders. Thomas used to drink, Clara said suddenly. After we lost our first baby, he changed. Got mean. That night he came home drunk. He yelled because supper was cold. He knocked over the lamp. The fire spread fast. I tried to save him even after everything, but he held me in the flames. Town said I wanted him dead. Easier for them to believe that than blame a churchman. Jacob lowered the hammer. My wife wanted everything I could not give. Status, town life. I kept hoping love would fix it. When she died, I felt relief. I hate myself for that. Maybe God gives us what we cannot keep, so we learn what we need, Clara said quietly. Maybe, he replied. Or maybe God just speaks softer than preachers. The wind shifted. Snow fell harder, faster. Jacob looked up. We need to stop. This is turning into a blizzard. You should head back before it gets worse. Too late for that, he said, pulling a tarp over the roof frame. I'm staying the night. Clara's face stilled. There's only one blanket. We will manage. That night, the storm shook the half-built cabin. They sat by the fire under the tarp roof, the blanket over both shoulders. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Clara pulled a worn book from her bag. You read? She asked. Barely, not much schooling. I could teach you. I would like that. She began reading aloud. The sound of her voice mixed with the crackle of fire and the howl of the wind. Her words made the small space feel safe. Near midnight, Clara fell asleep against his shoulder. Jacob froze, not wanting to wake her, not wanting to move at all. At dawn, she stirred, eyes opening. She pulled back, embarrassed, but before she could speak, Jacob stood and walked to the doorway. He frowned. What is it? Clara asked. He pointed at the fresh snow. Horse tracks. Someone circled the cabin during the storm. Clara stood beside him. The tracks went around the cabin twice before turning toward town. Someone had watched them through the storm. Someone had been close enough to see inside. And whoever it was would not keep silent for long. Snow covered the land in a thick white blanket, hiding the danger that had come during the storm. But the horse tracks around Clara's cabin stayed in Jacob's mind like a warning. Someone had watched them. Someone wanted to know what was happening between the scarred woman and the cattleman who kept riding to her land. For a full week, Jacob helped Clara from dawn to dusk. The cabin was stronger now. The walls were sealed, the roof almost complete, and a chimney carried smoke into the cold sky. They did not talk about the tracks again, but both stayed alert. One day at noon, as they sat by the fire inside the cabin to warm their hands, Jacob spoke without looking up. Town is talking. Clara's eyes lowered to her tin cup. When have they ever not talked? This time they're watching closer, Jacob said. Someone rode out in a blizzard to spy. That means purpose. Clara nodded once. I know who sent them, Amos Pritchard. Jacob had heard the name many times. A wealthy merchant in town, a man who always looked clean, polite, and proper, but whose smile never reached his eyes. He owned land, horses, and half the business in Elk Ridge. People respected him because he had money. People feared him because he had power. "He wanted me in his boarding house after Thomas died," Clara said. "He said he'd keep me fed and safe. I said no. He didn't like hearing no from a woman. And now he wants to own you," Jacob said with anger rising in his chest. Clara gave a tired smile. "People like him don't want wives. They want trophies." Jacob looked at her, really looked, her scar, her rough hands, her brave heart. Then he picked the wrong woman. They returned to work, side by side in the cold. That evening, Clara cooked beans and bread while Jacob repaired tools. They talked softly, learning each other piece by piece, as if building trust was another part of the cabin walls. When night fell, Clara pulled out the book again. Jacob sat near her, shoulder only inches away. "You ready to learn more?" she asked. "Ready as a calf learning to walk on ice," he answered. Clara read slowly, then let Jacob try. He stumbled through the words, but she waited, patient. When he finally finished the page, she gave a small nod. "You did good." Her praise warmed him more than the fire. The next afternoon, a rider appeared from town. A young boy brought crates of supplies. He placed them down without saying more than a quick hello. He kept his eyes low, as if afraid to be seen with them. When he left, Jacob noticed a folded note pinned to a flour sack. He opened it and read silently. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" Clara asked. Jacob handed her the note. "The offer still stands. Honest work for an honest woman. Leave the arrangement. A. Pritchard." Clara let out a long breath. "I told you." Jacob crumpled the note in his fist. "I'm writing back," he said. "No," Clara said firmly, grabbing his arm. "Let them talk. These walls don't care about gossip." Quote. He looked at her, frustrated. "I care." Her eyes softened. "I've been called names for months. If I react every time, I'll never breathe again. I just want peace." That night, Clara read the Odyssey again. She gave different voices to different characters, making Jacob laugh for the first time in a long time. It surprised him so much that Clara stopped reading. "Why did you stop?" he asked. "I haven't heard laughter here since I came. Not mine. Not anyone's." Jacob looked at the fire. "I haven't laughed in 2 years." They held each other's eyes, and something warm and alive passed quietly between them, no words needed. But outside, at the tree line, a shadow stood. A man watched the light through the cabin window. Pritchard's ranch hand had been sent again. He saw them smiling, sitting close, sharing warmth. He turned his horse and rode back to town. Rumors would spread like fire through dry grass. Days later, winter came hard. Snow fell for 3 days straight. Winds screamed against the cabin. Clara and Jacob were trapped inside, but the cabin held strong because they had built it together. On the second night, Clara woke screaming, "Fire! Smoke!" A memory she could never escape. Jacob rushed to her side, showing open hands so she would not feel threatened. "You're safe," he said gently. "You're here. The fire is banked." She shook, covering her face. "I dreamed I was burning again. Thomas was holding me down. I can still smell my skin burning. I hate that I'm still afraid." Jacob sat on the floor beside her bedroll, close but not touching. "When Sarah died, all I felt was relief. And I have hated myself for that. I thought it made me heartless." Clara looked at him through tears. "It makes you human." "I haven't touched anyone in 2 years," he said quietly. "Not in a way that mattered. I'm afraid to get close again, afraid I'll fail someone, afraid I'll lose them." Clara listened. For the first time, Jacob's voice cracked. The strong rancher was just a man holding broken pieces the same way she was. They sat in silence, sharing pain without fear of judgment. Two wounded souls, both scarred in different ways, both learning they were not alone. On the third night, Clara leaned against Jacob's shoulder as he read slowly from the book. He read with care, wanting to honor her gift. She fell asleep there, safe for the first time in years. He didn't move until sunlight returned. But the moment the storm cleared, Jacob stepped outside and froze. Fresh horse tracks circled the cabin again. Whoever watched them had come close enough to look through the windows and see everything. Their privacy was gone. By the week before Christmas, Clara decided she would not hide anymore. "I'm going to town with you," she said. "I'm tired of whispers behind my back. Let them say it to my face." Jacob didn't like the idea. "Town is not kind to you." "Then they can be unkind to my face," she said. So they went. Elkridge fell silent the moment they arrived. People stared, not even pretending to look away. Preacher Whitmore stepped in front of the mercantile with Amos Pritchard and church elders at his side. "Brother Morgan," the preacher said loudly, "this woman is known for sin. You disgrace yourself by keeping company with her." A crowd formed fast. Eyes judged. Mouths whispered. Pritchard stepped forward. "Clara, my offer still stands. Honest work for an honest woman. Leave this arrangement. End it. Save what little remains of your name." Jacob felt pressure build in his chest. The town, the looks, the shame, the fear of being judged again, just like with Sarah. A familiar panic rose. A lifetime of caring too much about what others thought wrapped around his throat. "It's just work," Jacob heard himself say. "The cabin's nearly done." The words were out before he could grab them back. Clara's face changed. Hurt. Deep, cutting hurt. She stepped away from him like he had struck her. "See?" Pritchard said with a smile. "Even he knows you're not worth defending." Clara turned and walked to the wagon. She did not look back. Not once. They rode home in silence. Snow began to fall again, covering the road like nothing had happened, even though everything had. When they reached her cabin, Clara stepped down. "Don't come back," she said, voice calm but broken. "The cabin is finished. Our agreement is done." She walked inside and closed the door he had built. Jacob sat in the wagon, the cold burning his skin. He had done it again. He had chosen his reputation over honesty, his fear over truth. Just like before. Only this time, he had destroyed something real. Christmas came cold and quiet. Snow lay deep across the land, turning the world white and still. Jacob Morgan sat alone at his ranch table, staring at the frost on the window. His house was warm, large, well-built, and empty. It felt like a cage. On the hill outside, his wife Sarah's grave sat under a coat of snow. For 2 years he had lived beside that grave like a shadow. He had told himself he was honoring her memory, but now he understood he had only been hiding from life. Clara had offered him something honest, something real, and he had thrown it away in one sentence. Spoken to please people who didn't matter. He had repeated his old sin, not standing for the truth. A bottle of whiskey sat beside him untouched. Drinking would only make him a coward with excuses. He didn't want excuses. He wanted to be the man Clara believed he was, for a short time. 3 miles away, Clara worked alone in the cabin they had built together. She repaired a door hinge, fixed a loose board, gathered wood. She moved like someone trying to stay busy so her heart wouldn't think. She had let herself believe again, let herself trust. It hurt worse than the fire had. On Christmas morning, Clara opened her door and froze. On the step lay a small bundle of winter flowers, gathered and tied with a leather string. Frozen in ice, preserved. No note. She knew who had left them. She carried the flowers inside, sat on the floor and cried for the first time since arriving on this land. Not because she was weak, but because someone still cared enough to try. That afternoon, an old rider appeared at Jacob's ranch. Samuel Reed, the man who had taught Jacob ranching when he was a boy. Tough, weathered, sharp-tongued at 70 years old. "You look like hell," Samuel said, not bothering to get off his horse. "Feel worse," Jacob answered. "Good," Samuel snapped. "Means you got a conscience left. That woman built a life with her bare hands. You should have stood with her. Instead, you shrank like a scared schoolboy." Jacob swallowed. "She won't forgive me." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Maybe not, Maybe you don't deserve it, but if you don't try, you'll die alone in that cold house talking to ghosts." He turned his horse. A man's mistakes don't define him. What he does after does. Then he rode off, leaving Jacob with the truth settling in his chest like iron. Jacob walked up the hill to Sarah's grave. Snow crunched under his boots. He stood in silence, looking down at her name carved in stone. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry, I couldn't be what you needed. Sorry I cared too much about how things looked. But I'm done living for memories and other people's opinions." He wiped snow from the headstone. "It's time I live honestly, even if I fail." That morning he saddled his horse and rode into town. Sunday service was packed. People turned to look as Jacob walked in, snow still on his coat. He stood at the front of the church. "I'm here to speak about Clara Brennan," he said, voice steady, "and about myself." A hush fell. "You judged her without knowing the truth. I had more right than anyone to speak for her, and I failed. Clara is braver than all of us. She lost everything, and still she built a life with her own hands. She has more honesty in her scar than most of us have in our whole bodies." People shifted uncomfortably, and if anyone is to blame for sin, blame me. I let fear guide my tongue. I let pride speak for me. I hurt her to look respectable. That makes me a coward, not her. Preacher Whitmore frowned. "Brother Morgan." "No," Jacob said firmly. "If God gave us hands, it wasn't to point at others, it was to build. Clara built a home. All you built were rumors." Silence, heavy, unmoving. Jacob tipped his hat and walked out. He didn't care what anyone thought anymore. Clara was on her roof, finishing the last shingles, when she saw him ride up. She kept hammering, pretending not to see him. Jacob dismounted and picked up the spare hammer. Without asking, he climbed the ladder and helped her finish the roof. They worked in silence until the final shingle slid into place. For a long moment, they sat on the rooftop, breathing in the cold mountain air. Jacob finally spoke. "I stood in front of the whole church this morning. Told them everything. Told them I was wrong. Told them you're worth 10 of the finest folks in town." Clara kept her eyes forward. "Words don't fix what's broken." "No," Jacob said softly, "but truth can start to." He turned to her. Snowflakes clung to his hair, his coat, his lashes. His voice was quiet, honest. "I don't know how to say the right things, Clara, but I know how to build. I want to build a life with you. Equal partners. Honest. No fancy. No lies." Clara looked at him, really looked. She saw the man he could be, not the one he feared he was. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I'd like to stand beside you anyway." Quote, she studied his face, his eyes steady on hers. No shame, no fear, just truth. "Deal," she whispered. Jacob reached for her hand. This time, when their hands met, she didn't let go. He leaned in, pausing for her nod, and when she gave it, their first kiss was slow, gentle, and full of everything they had not said. A shout rose from the road below. They looked up. Several wagons were coming toward the cabin, families from town. Men carried lumber and tools. Women brought baskets of food. Children ran through the snow. Even Preacher Whitmore walked forward with lowered head. Amos Pritchard came last, unable to look anyone in the eye. "We heard your words," Whitmore said quietly. "We came to help build the barn." "Our barn," Clara corrected, standing beside Jacob. The people who once judged now came with open hands. Not all, but enough to matter. Enough to show change was possible. Clara stood on land she once worked alone. Now there was a community around her, a life beginning to grow roots. Spring arrived months later. Wildflowers covered the fields in purple, yellow, and blue. Clara woke in the cabin filled with sunlight. Jacob sat in a chair near the fire, half asleep from riding to and from his ranch each night to court her properly. He waited as long as she needed, never pushing. That morning, she watched him sleep. This man who chose her, not for beauty, not for show, but for truth. He opened his eyes and smiled. "Morning." "Morning," she replied. They cooked together, worked their garden, fixed fences. The kind of quiet life both had prayed for in their darkest nights. Later, as the sun set, they sat on the porch. Wildflowers swayed in the breeze. "Jacob?" Clara said. "Yes?" "You asked me to marry you when I was ready." She took his hand. "I'm ready." He smiled softly. No grand gesture, no crowd, just truth. "You know," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're beautiful." Clara touched her scar. "I'm scarred." "Same thing," he said. "A scar just proves you lived, and you survived." Night fell gently over the mountains. The cabin stood strong, the garden bloomed, the barn stood full of life. The cowboy and the scarred woman sat side by side, two broken hearts that fit together like the beams of the home they built. Not perfect, not fancy, just honest, and honest was strong enough to last a lifetime.